This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our newsletter and our YouTube channel and our great sponsors, Italy Rooting, Phil Italy, and Abiativa Casa. And today I have a returning guest, the author of Siciliana, Carlo Treviso. So welcome, Carlo. Thanks for being here.
Ciao, Bob. How are you? Thanks for having me again.
I'm really, really good. So I thought what we might talk about today a little bit is, your Sicilian background and, what drove you to look into the history of Sicily?
Yeah, so my dad comes from Sicily. He comes from a little town called Porticello. It's on the east side of Palermo, so the same kind of province. And growing up, we didn't really have much access to our Sicilian culture other than going to my Nana's house. Obviously, I heard the language there. We went there every Christmas Eve for the big seafood feast. But other than that, we weren't really exposed to too much true Sicilian. We were raised as Americans. We learned English. We didn't even learn the language growing up. And it wasn't until I was more so into my adulthood, I went to Sicily for the first time in the year 2014. I took a trip there. And that's when I really got to see the island in its full glory. I took a tour and they took you around the entire island. I saw the cathedrals and the ruins and the Mount Etna, the volcano. I got to hike up the slopes and I really got to experience the land firsthand. And it was there that I started hearing the legends and the stories. And I first heard about the Sicilian Vespers uprising of 1282, which really kind of fueled my journey into writing the novel Siciliana.
Yeah, so I didn't realize you had made the trip. We were in Sicily for a few days when we went over in, what year was it now? 23, I guess it was. And we didn't go around the whole island, but we were in Palermo. And my wife's family is from Shaka. So we took a trip over there. I guess it took about an hour or something like that. But it is really a fascinating place to be because, you look one way and you see the sea, and you look the other way, you see the mountains. And I can't wait to see Gattopardo.
Oh, yeah, right. That's a Netflix series, right?
They just released it in Italy, and we all saw the movie, I guess, from 60 years ago, but
Sure.
This is a much nicer production, it looks like.
I've been following social media. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of it was filmed in Palermo, but we watched another, boy, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the Florio family, which I had never heard of, and it was Italian, and they did the voiceover, but it was pretty neat because same thing. Some of it was filmed in Palermo, some of it was filmed in Cefalù, and we were watching, and I said to my wife, I said, "That's Cefalù. That's the dock at Cefalù."
That's right. My background, the Rock of Cefalù, right?
Yeah.
There's the novel, The Florios of Sicily, which I've read, which is really good. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't. So what did they touch on in that?
It's about the family history. So it starts with the earthquake, and then there's they move to Palermo and they kind of start their business. I'm working in the seasonings and all that kind of stuff, the silks. And it's just basically about the rise of the family from nothing into this powerhouse political family.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the movie. I guess the movie is probably based on the book.
Sure, it's a true story, obviously. Yeah,
and somebody we were talking about. I was talking about that on another podcast, and somebody had mentioned that. So growing up, when you were hearing the language, did you think you were hearing Italian, or did you know you were hearing Sicilian?
It's in my mind, it was always Italian, and I never could really. They talked so fast and so impassioned. I always remember sitting around my Nana's kitchen table, very small little wooden table, and they were just going at it, talking to each other, and it just sounded like sounds to me. Like I never really could pick up on it. I mean, I heard some of the curse words once in a while, but yeah. So I always just assumed it was Italian. The Sicilian nuance, I really didn't start to pick up on until I was, becoming more of an adult.
Yeah, no, the same thing with me. I always thought I was hearing Italian. So when you were in Sicily and going around, did you get to go to the hometown?
I have not visited Porticello yet. It's a little bit out of the way of the tour I was on, but one day I want to go back, and I still have family there. Second and third cousins are still there. I mean, I feel like the entire town is pretty much related to me somehow. So
Probably are. It probably is. Yeah. So now you're in contact with the cousins there, yeah?
I am. Yeah, yeah. We're all on Facebook together. I'm in a group and yeah, yeah. So one of these days, I mean, I'm sure anybody, I mean, not to call them out, I'm sure any of them will be happy to have me and put me up at one of their places.
Yeah, it's such a different feeling, when you get to the hometown and even if you don't know anybody, it's like just, for me anyway. I don't know if it's nostalgia or what word you would put to it, but it's really a great experience.
What town was your wife from?
My wife's from Shaka.
And where is that in
That's
geography?
that's on the other side. Like if you drew a line across the island from straight line from Palermo across,
Hmm.
it's on the other shore. So almost a direct line. But it's
East,
like an
west.
hour away. I guess it would be south. I guess it would be south. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it would be south. I don't know. My directions are horrible. So you went to, so did you go when you went, you were just on a tour with the family or it just like was so it sounds like it was just a scheduled kind of tour type of thing. Yeah.
It was a bus tour. Yeah, yeah. It was I don't know, it was like a 10-day tour. You book it, they do everything for you. It was we flew into Palermo. You go around the entire island and then you fly out of Catania, which at that time I'm sure hopefully the airport's better, but wow, it was the bus pulled up in Catania and it was just people everywhere. No lines. I was like, I don't know how I'm getting out of here. Literally the entire airport looked like a concert. It was just people everywhere. No lines.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'll have to ask I'll have to
But
ask
those
Mike.
Sicilians, we made it work. Everyone queued up and somehow I got to the front. So
Yeah, I mean we took the ferry across from the mainland and then we flew out of Palermo and Palermo was fine. It was, yeah, yeah, Palermo wasn't bad, but it was crowded. I mean, we had to hunt for a place to sit and all of that,
sure.
So, you wrote this novel. Are you working on something else?
I am, yeah. So I'm working on a second novel. I'm about 2 years into it. I mean, as you may know, I put a lot of research and historical references in the book to really bring it to life. So it takes me a long time to research it, outline it, and I've actually started drafting the pages. So hopefully, another 1 or 2 years I'll be done and get it out there. It's not a sequel. It's people ask, is it a sequel to Siciliana? It's new story, new heroine, still set in Sicily, different time period.
Oh, fantastic and
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And when we were talking in the pre-interview, I mean, I have some ideas for historical novels and in particular, some of the people in my family because of my family history, how do you go, where do you start? When you want to create characters and put words in their mouth, if you know what I mean.
Sure. So for talking to somebody who might have no experience writing stories, a good way to practice that I was kind of taught was think of a memory. Think of a family memory. Your fifth birthday party, right? So just think of a really strong memory that you can still see in your head. And then kind of like a journal exercise, write it like a scene. So get like you are a character in that scene, your mom's a character in that scene, and like just write it as it like write your memory like it's a story. And that kind of helps you put dialogue, your characters are already set. They're already characters in your life. They already have names. And all you're doing is walking them through the scene and giving them dialogue. So that's a kind of a good way to practice visualizing the scene in your head and putting it onto paper. So do that a couple times with some of your memories, and then you'll see, wow, I actually have a lot of cool little short stories here. And then once you're ready and you really want to start doing something truly original, then that's a whole different ball game. Obviously, start with a topic, and you have to find that idea.
Yeah, but like you said, you're getting practice with that dialogue and all of that.
Yep.
And then how do you set the scenes for in historical context? I mean, my example is my fourth great grandmother, who was the Duchess of Capricotta. And her story is really interesting because what happened was she left her family. She took up with this French officer at some point, left her family. She wound up in France for a while. Eventually, she came back to Italy, then got caught up in the whole Napoleon thing. And she
Mm.
had a stipend from the French government for a few years, and then apparently died in Paris without too much money. And her daughter eventually then, took over um, the town, for lack of a better phrase. So how do you research stuff like that, especially when it's not a well-known person, but there is a history there?
Well, that's where the fun of kind of fiction writing comes in. So what I would do is, I mean, obviously that's a really interesting story. That's a great setting for a historical drama. But you always want to pick your genre first. So what I mean by that is, so Siciliana, for example, is the basic novel is a revolution, like a woman rises and becomes a revolutionary hero. That's so it's a fight for freedom. If it's a family drama, there's always something like what is it a betrayal story? Is it a power struggle story? You really need to kind of hook it onto a specific genre versus just letting it be a willy-nilly whatever, historical story. Because you really need to start once you pick your genre, then you can start following the rules of that genre. So for example, with Siciliana, it's a thriller. So I playing in the thriller space, that means the chapters are going to be short. The chapters are going to have cliffhangers on them. There are going to be parallel storylines, so you're kind of always going back and forth between characters. That all of those little genre tricks help give the illusion that this story is moving really quickly. But that's the thriller. If I told it as I don't know, like a mystery story, it'd be a completely different set of rules I'd have to follow. So you kind of first of all want to pick your genre. And that's, harder than it looks because there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Like, a movie like Gladiator, it's a guy who wants to get revenge for his wife and child who got killed. And he wants revenge against the emperor. But The Godfather, for example, completely different. It's about a guy who doesn't want to be part of the family business, but gets sucked in anyway. So you need to find that hook before you really delve into the historical time period and the research and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because that's something that I haven't thought about. Because I could go, to your point, I could go several different ways with this thing. I mean, part of the setting is, when the French army, went into Italy. But she actually had done this before. She actually had left before. And yeah, so that gives me food for two good things to do.
Well,
One is I've kind of written stories, about my experiences. So I got a little practice at that.
there's a resource I'll give you. There's a book, a great book that I use called Save the Cat. And it was written by a Hollywood screenwriter. And what he did was he basically templatized all the different genres and the overall arc of how you should tell a story. And he actually borrowed a lot from, if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell's the famous ancient mythologist. He created the hero's journey template. So again, that's another resource, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. These things are just basically templatized ways to tell your story, which date back all the way to like Homer's The Odyssey. Like ancient Greeks all the way up to modern Hollywood use the same templates. So you have so look at that and you really kind of like start putting your story into the different areas. Okay, so she was brought up here, the French invade here, there's got to be a retaliation. And then you can start plotting out what you need to happen.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Oh wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that. I'm gonna have to get that book. My wife keeps asking me, I said, when are you gonna write another one? Not that my books have been very successful, but I didn't write them for that. I mean, I wrote them for me, and that's a couple of other people asked me, and I said, you know, write your family story for yourself first.
Of course. That's the thing. You should really be your first audience. I mean, same with me when I wrote my novel. It's like it was something I wanted to see. It was a genre like I loved growing up. So you have to really do it for yourself first. And hopefully people share your taste. That's really all you can hope for.
Now, were you trained as a writer or a novelist or anything like that before you decided to write this book?
Well, formally, I went to film school. So I went through even in high school, going back to high school, I went to a technical high school where I learned videography, communications, script writing. And then in college, I actually studied film. So I was doing screenwriting and directing and producing. And then into my, after college, I got into advertising and started producing commercials. So I've always been involved in the creative process somehow throughout my entire life. But it wasn't until later in my adulthood where I decided to actually start writing a novel. So I embarked on that journey back in 2014, 2015.
And that's interesting because, people there's been a couple of stories that I've heard or I've talked about And people said, you should make that a movie. And I'm like, it's not, you don't just make that a movie.
Well, to be honest, like to be a writer, you really just need to study the authors you really like. Like I'm going to use a really weird reference, but the guy who wrote Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio movie, a couple years, maybe a decade ago, it was based on a book, a true story about the guy. Jordan Belfort was the Wolf of Wall Street, and he apparently wrote that novel when he was in prison. And he said the way that he has no training as a writer, but the way he did it was he went to the prison library and he was just taking down books that he liked. And then he started studying how these authors set a scene and how they set up a character and how they use dialogue. He was literally studying the actual like punctuation and the format. And that's how he wrote that book, Wolf of Wall Street. And I thought that was fascinating because of this con man in prison writing this novel in a way that I feel like is how you really do it if you have no training at all.
Yeah,
So,
and somebody else said that to me too. They said, read a lot. I mean, I really like, I think she's working on another one now. Diana Giovanazzo. I don't know if you read either one of her books, but she tells, she does. Her first book was about Garibaldi. I think it was The Woman in Red, about Garibaldi's, and who knew? He had a South American wife when he went to South America. He was actually married in Italy. He went to South America, and then they were kind of like a common law wife. And then he brings her back to Italy, and and I said to her, I said, when I first saw the title, I said, oh boy, this is a chick book, but it wasn't.
sure.
Because even though she was telling the story basically through the eyes of Garibaldi's wife, but a lot of it had to do with Garibaldi, how he started in South America and then brought the revolution to Italy and all of that stuff. And then the other one was, what's the name of it? Can't think of the name of his head, but the main character was Marie Antoinette's sister, who was the Queen of Naples. And,
Wow.
And, it's fascinating. When I do the edits, I'll put the name up on the title so people could see it. But basically the story is, again, it's about her struggles as the Queen of Naples, because the King of Naples, he didn't want to be king, basically.
Okay. Sure.
So he's an interesting character too. But yeah, check them out. It's really, really good historical fictions. And like I said, the titles would lead you to, it's like, like just this kind of chick book. And she doesn't mind me saying that because I said that to her. But they're not, they're good for everybody,
Nothing like a good, strong female hero,
Well, yeah, no. And that's what's so interesting about your book, because you're a guy and you wrote the hero is a female.
Right.
And so why did you pick a female hero?
Well, I took a lot. So the funny thing about the Sicilian Vespers is there's not a lot of historical record on it. There are a few history books and then a lot of it's oral tradition. So what I really did was, a lot of the story, the nuggets of the story were kind of already there for me to start playing with, per se. I didn't have to make a lot up. And I really hitched on this, the legend that it was started by a young woman. So a lot of conflicting legends based on how the Sicilian Vespers started. Some even say that it was a conspiracy. There's an author, I can't remember his name, but he proposed that it was a whole conspiracy that was set up by the King of Spain and all this kind of stuff. But I like the idea that it was started by a young woman. So on Vespers night, the night of the Easter Vigil, when the Sicilians were celebrating Easter, the French arrived, started harassing the men and the women in the crowd. One soldier took it too far, started groping one of the women. She took out her blade and she stabbed him, and she cried death to the French. And I thought that was a very powerful way to kind of kick off a historical epic. So I hitched it on that legend. And then obviously I built out the character from there. I had to give her a backstory. I had to give her a journey to go on. So the book starts when she's a child. You kind of see her family. You see the Angevins come in, the havoc that they wrought on her life. And then you kind of follow her as she's an adult and becomes this kind of Joan of Arc hero for Sicily. So all of that was started with that nugget of that oral legend where the woman starts the rebellion.
And you were never in any of the place other than that tour. You were never in any of the places in the book, which is also fascinating to me.
Well, the funny thing is, yeah, so a lot of the places in Palermo I visited had to do with the Sicilian Vespers. So the Santo Spirito Church, Palermo Cathedral, the Norman Palace. The Norman Palace is where the French ran their operations in Palermo. So like you still, I was fascinated to see that a lot of these places are still there that actually were there back then during the Revolution.
Yeah, well, that's the one cool thing about Italy. They don't tear anything down, not like here.
I will say, unfortunately, if you go to Palermo today, it probably has changed a lot, but it does look a little rough, right? Like I'm not sure if you remember a lot of stray dogs, a lot of graffiti, but personally, I kind of like that kind of stuff. It kind of gives it like an edge.
Yeah, we didn't, and that's interesting because, I mean, we were only there for, I guess, we were there 2 nights, maybe 2 nights or 3 nights. But no, we didn't see a lot of that, to be honest with you. It wasn't, I mean, we didn't go all over the place. Going into, I remember some graffiti like driving in when we were going into the main road, but like the old city part, I don't recall too much of that. And I don't recall, like you mentioned, stray dogs or a lot of homeless. I mean, the only thing there's one street, which I guess they close off a few blocks of that street on Friday and Saturday night. And all the restaurants put tables in the middle of the street and all of that. And the only, there was a couple of people that kind of, like, begging for money or something like that. But the owners shooed them away pretty quickly.
Sure. Well, it's been 10 years since I've been, so maybe it's changed a lot. I mean, that's fair to say.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, we weren't, we were only there a couple of nights and we were just kind of around the Duomo and, that area. I mean, we didn't go through the whole town and stuff like that. But it wasn't, I know, of course, from the hotel, there was like a square with steps and stuff like that, and people would be out there and just hanging around. It didn't seem dangerous or anything like that,
Yeah, no, of course not. I mean, I walked around all of those little back alleys, like when you had your free time, and it was just fascinating to see those back alleys of Palermo as you're just walking through. Looks like how it probably looked back in the 1200s. Just
well, yeah, and all those. I mean, Bari was the same way. I mean, we couldn't find out the way back to our B&B for like 3 days. I finally figured out. I finally said to my wife, I said, if we walk along the water, I said, we'll find our way back. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit longer, but we know where we are.
It's amazing. I mean, it felt like walking around Palermo at least was like, I felt like Indiana Jones. Like you would be down this really narrow hallway, you would go through a door, suddenly you're inside this huge Baroque church that you had no idea was even there. And then you'd step out, and now you're in front of the Pretoria Fountain. You turn a corner, there's an Arabic column. I'm just like literally within like a 5-minute walk. It's nuts.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about Sicily because they were conquered by everybody. So you see all of those kinds of different things and how, you could see even in some places where it, may have been, a mosque and now it's a church, or it was a church and then it was a mosque and now it's a church again, and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
There's on Palermo Cathedral, there's a column at the front of the entrance that still has a Quran inscription on the pillar. That's still there. That was left over from when it used to be a mosque. It's fascinating, all that stuff you can still see there.
Well, yeah, and that's when people do their DNA too. That's what's funny about some of the people. I can't have the Arabic. I can't have Greek. I can't have this. I'm 100% Italian, and I try to explain to them that the DNA is different from culture. Yes, your family's from Italy. They've been there 500 years, but that doesn't mean that you don't carry over traits from 1,000 years ago or something like that.
Well, I had a friend I was talking to a while back, and he had Asian DNA. I think he said something. It's like there's like hints of Chinese in my DNA. I'm like, I'm Italian. I'm 100% Italian. I'm like, oh, well, that's probably, I mean, it could be related to the Silk Road. I mean, the Silk Road went from, I think, Turkey all the way to China. So and then, Turkey was very Greek back in the pre-medieval times. So I mean, clearly people were probably going from Turkey to Sicily because Sicily was also very Greek. So that's probably your relatives are probably having a good time on that Silk Road is what was happening.
Well, yeah, my wife she has like, it always changes, but at one point she had like 10% Norwegian, and she's half Puerto Rican and half Sicilian. So, and we know the Vikings were in Sicily, so who knows?
The Vikings and the Germans, the Swabians, they were called Swabians, but they came from Bavaria. Frederick II, the most famous Holy Roman Emperor that pretty much built up Sicily in the 1200s, he was German. Like a lot of people don't realize Germany had a huge stake in Sicily also.
Yeah, Frederick's actually one of my great grandfathers.
What? Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, yeah. My father's mother was from two noble families, and I was actually because the Libra di Oro lists everybody. I was able to trace back and see, then starting to find them, marriages into the Spanish and the French and all of that kind of stuff. Mainly from Spain, because when the Spaniards came, there weren't enough Italian, there weren't maybe any, or very few Spanish noble women for the Spaniards to marry. So they started marrying the Italian nobility. And so then, then you get those connections back. And I have some Spanish relatively close. I mean, within the last, 200 years, I suppose, which doesn't sound close, but in terms of genealogy, it is pretty close.
Right. I hope Frederick left you a good inheritance. Did that pass down?
Not a dime. Not a dime. We don't have any houses. We don't have any. Yeah. There are still some of the palaces, and some of them are pretty famous and stuff like that. But no, I think even my cousins in Italy don't have anything.
His tomb is in Palermo Cathedral. Did you see that by chance?
I don't, I don't remember.
So
I know we were in there, but I don't remember. We must have, because it's probably.
If you were in there, you probably saw it. It's tucked away in a corner.
Yeah.
You can go there and kneel before your great great grandfather, say hi.
Well, I did do that in St. Peter's, because Pope Paul III is one of my great 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 grandfathers. And
oh wow. Okay.
And odd luck, that day they had that whole section. I couldn't get close enough to really get a good picture. So there's this a picture of me, pointing at it. Yeah, I'm fascinated by everything Italian. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I live and breathe it these days. I mean, that's what I do. And one thing that I wish I did sooner was join the local Italian club. Because it's great, because everybody kind of thinks the same way, and it's nice to have that, keep that culture alive in America, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's on us to kind of carry the torch. Like, that's one of my missions behind the book. I mean, it's so easy to lose connection with your history, and it's up to us to keep the traditions alive. We still do the seafood Christmas every year, like this little things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really, really important, because those of us who grew up hearing the language and that kind of stuff, it's starting to get lost. The one good thing, though, is people now are starting to name their kids Italian names again, which is really, really, really cool. Keep the culture alive.
Yeah. My sister actually is having her first child. Big deal for our family. She's due in like 2 months, and she's naming her Maria.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, listen, Carla, this has been great. A lot of fun. We're all going to look forward to the new book. And when it comes out, we'll have to talk about it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
No, my pleasure.